of the fact that Dick Cheney told us to expect war for the next generation, and then set about making a list of 60 countries that the United States military could invade or go into and occupy. This notion of endless war is to establish a war economy within our government and with the operation of the economy, which means then that the resources that would normally be dedicated to uplifting human needs then goes into the corporate greed aspect of the war economy. One additional aspect I think that we have to be aware of is the fact that there is an international dimension to this as well. We have in the audience with us people from Ghana, Haiti, and Congo. And as the war machine churns our young people who have been stationed in over 100 countries around the world, so too it must churn the access to resources and human beings who get caught up in this churning process. And so with respect to Ghana, you've got AFRICOM. With respect to Haiti, you've got occupation. With respect to Congo, you've got outright genocide. And then with respect to Africa as a whole, you've got the issues of sovereignty, self-determination, and the most important issue of them all is the issue of land. And so the use of the political power that we have must be one to, quote, speak truth to power, but also to impact public policy. And then the final thing I would say is that we have to beware the hollow women of the hegemon. These hollow women can be represented in the likes of a Condoleezza Rice, who most women, when they become involved in politics or get active, basically what they're looking at is a way to infuse the political process with their values. But these hollow women of the hegemon don't represent the values of women. They don't represent the values of the home, of nurturing. What they represent are the values of the hegemon, those who are already in power, and their sole function is to perpetuate the power that they have.
Before we, I want to say this has been the Josh Walensky Show, and we are going to go to our second part. But I think that the women on this platform have given us sufficient evidence that it's about time for the men to move over and let the women come aboard. And I, for one, would be very happy to have Cynthia and Rosa in the White House. But I do know that there are some problems, like Condoleezza Rice and Lady Macbeth, but we'll discuss that some other time. And so this has been the first half of the Josh Walensky Show. See the second part next week. But let me, with saying that, I would like Miss Bailey to finish up. Say something. Or Donald.
Donald. It's Donald Smith.
Yeah, I was out of sequence to ask Cynthia a question that I would like to have done. But I'd like to put a question to the entire panel. Here we have someone of great brilliance and depth and commitment, not only to African people, but to poor people worldwide. Someone who has a
Donald,
scope.
We'll have to continue this later on, but it's my fault. Okay, good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.
You wanted a closing comment. Sorry, I wasn't here.
That was my fault.
Oh, you can do it.
Hello, welcome to the Josh Walensky Show. This is the dynamic second part. Boy, I certainly am not cool sometimes. But anyway, this is the dynamic part of the second part of black women in politics. And before we continue and go to Nellie Bailey and Dr. Donald Smith, I'd like to introduce somebody who played a great part in making this show possible, Cornelius R. Ricks. I'd like him to say a few words. Cornelius?
One of the reasons why I think I wanted to speak tonight was to let you know why I created this particular project of Black Women in Politics. Just last week, we had another discussion dealing with why does white folks write black books, which was a very, very interesting discussion we had that I found to be very, very incredible. But one of the reasons why I create these type of panel discussions is to deal with our legacy. I get a lot of times that it frustrates me within politics as well as within the media how we're profiled. And one of the things I've done with TVone, when I work with TVone, I see black people living, laughing, and loving together with TVone. When I brought TVone to Harlem, was that we got tired of looking at our people being profiled on BET, and Kathy Hughes came along and created TVone as well as Radio One. And I was proud to do that. And with my mother passing, her legacy, people asked me, Sister Cornelius, why are you letting your mother's legacy die? So one of the things I decided to do was create a foundation called the Hannah B. Ricks Foundation. My mother got her doctorate back in 1955. She went to Virginia State and she actually graduated. She got her doctorate from Columbia University. And then she created a school called Ricky Day Kindergarten that was named after me down in Newport News, Virginia. So by people reading this particular profile of my mother, of her legacy, people said to me, create something. So what I did, I was at home one night, it's God's blessing. I was at home one night and I had all these magazines and I created this profile of a collage of black women. And I said to myself, what am I going to name it? So I said Celebration. Then I said Celebration 2008. And then the sponsor package is called Spirit of Hope, hoping I get some money. But the bottom line is that the whole point, a long story short, is that by creating this particular project, I thought it would be something to be very special for us as a people to keep our legacy going. It seems like in politics that our special women within politics that I mentioned, they forget about Shirley Chisholm, people like my sister here, Senator McKinney. It seems like they're just blocking us completely out. So I figure that we should create something that's very, very special for our people and special to our community. And I just want to read what it stands for. And actually, I'm doing an event honoring black women. We're not just honoring celebrities. We're honoring black women with AIDS, HIV, alcohol and drug problems, dealing with also domestic violence, rape. We're honoring women also, they're the forgotten souls in the community itself. I feel as though those are the real achievers in the world. It's not all about the celebrities in the forefront. It's people within the community that's done a lot of great things in the community that's not recognized. But the whole reason why I created this project is called Celebration. And what it stands for is a Women's History Month special celebrating, honoring, and awarding celebrity moms. And what it stands for of achievements, it stands for Celebrating Moms' mission for the month of March is to highlight the extraordinary achievements of women and moms in our community and in the world. And by doing that, by creating this, it's been so incredible how Saudi Arabia came to me, Saudi Arabian newspaper, Saudi Arabian News came to me and asked me to actually produce it in Saudi Arabia as well as dealing within the United Nations. So one of the things that I'm trying to do is basically put together a program and basically raise money to deal with moving forward with this particular project. And it's a pleasure for me to be here with Josh Marinsky, to give me the chance to work with him. And I call him my white father, because he's been there so much for me as far as like dealing with, giving me so much of motivation to do this particular project. And I appreciate you people coming. Have a good time and ask some great questions. Have a good night. Bye-bye.
Nellie?
Well, thank you.
Donald.
Thank you, Josh, my co-moderator. The second part of the show, we're going to lead off with Dr. Donald Smith.
Oh, thank you, Nellie. Again, it's my great honor to be here, to sit between these brilliant, dynamic, beautiful women of African descent. The question that I want to pose is not to a single participant. It is to the entire panel except Cynthia McKinney. she symbolizes the question that I'm posing. When we have brilliant, dynamic, courageous women, and men too, who step out there on the front lines and who tell the truth and who walk the walk and talk the talk, how do we protect them? Cynthia lost her seat because she asked the right questions, not the wrong questions. So I asked the members of the panel, how do we protect these women like Cynthia McKinney and others? Anybody?
Well, I think we have to think about the media and the corporate control of the media, which doesn't let our story be told, which in Cynthia's case, of course, demonized her, and all of their influences, all of their lies were disseminated, and that's what the public bought. They were able to find, as you're always able to find, a Judas Iscariot somewhere. There's always going to be someone who will betray the cause. But we have to control the media. We have to tell our story. Nobody will tell it like we can, or we will. So part of what we have to do with Cynthia running for as a presidential candidate on the Green Party, we have to make certain that people know what she's talking about, that she knows that she is answering the deep cry of the people in this country out of the war that is not only abroad in Iraq and maybe in Iran, but the war that's right here in the barrios, in the reservations, in the Harlems of this country. And that's what she is fighting for. She's fighting to have those $1 trillion that are spent on a useless war, to spend it on constructive things, for our children, for our housing, for mass transit, for the infrastructure, for health care. 646, Kanye's bill, universal health care, single payer. Why don't we have it? Every industrialized country in the world has it. But here in the United States, we have children dying in the infants dying in the Harlems of this country, more than in, some of the least developed countries.
I'd like to give other members of the panel the opportunity also to answer this question. How do we empower our people to protect our heroes and heroines? That's the question.
You're asking that question of judges who are extremely restricted in what we can say about anything, including politics. Although we are elected officials, we're not exactly on the same par as, for example, our presidential candidates or candidates who are running for public office other than judges. And so any views that we're expressing here obviously are our own views and not those of our court system or anything of that sort. I, speaking for myself, happen to agree with Ms. Burrows about how we protect anybody who is running for office, particularly people of color, particularly African Americans, because we have been stereotyped throughout our existence in this part of the world. And in order to counteract that, we of course need to be in charge of our own image and how it's projected. And so being in charge of the media will help that a great deal. If you're talking about other types of protection, then of course that is something that each of us as citizens of this country, of the state, and of whatever cities we live in will have to decide for ourselves how we conduct ourselves at the polls, because we should all go out to vote regardless of what candidates we might or not be supporting. We all owe it to our ancestors to get out there and vote and encourage others to vote. So that's another way that we can protect ourselves, those of us who are running for office and those of us who are in office. If we want to stay there, people have to come out and vote for us. And any of you who voted for me, I'm an elected judge in this county. I was elected for my second 14-year term last year. And so I thank any of you in this audience or in the viewing audience who came out and voted for me. And Judge James is up for election hopefully this year. And she's been elected previously to the civil court. And in advance, I'm sure she'll want to speak for herself about people getting out to the polls and voting.
May I interject for a moment? There's something, I have an enigma, and I want to ask you about it. You mentioned people of color. Now, by the same token, this is white paper. Now, do I or anyone else in this city look white? So we are also people of color. But by the same token, every white person, as I told Leonard Jeffries a few days ago, is a racist in recovery. Even progressive white people, as proven by the New Yorker cover a few days ago. Here's a magazine that features Seymour Hersh and other radicals, and then they have the audacity to run that kind of cover. So I think that my statement, which I borrow from attorney Ron McGuire, is absolutely correct, that even progressive people are racists in recovery. Would you like to talk on that issue a little?
Well, yes, I would, but I think Judge James wanted to say something.
Please.
And
I'm sitting sideways. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, it's quite all right. Really, my esteemed colleague, Justice Abdul Salam, said it all. I do think that, as Viney talked about, that it's very important that we are able to communicate, and that is done through the fourth estate, the media. Of course, this program itself that I'm very pleased to participate in is part of that effort to try to educate people. And I think that as citizens, we're responsible for exercising our franchise. Again, many of our ancestors struggled for it, even died, to allow us to have that opportunity to exercise that franchise. So that's very, very important. But I also think that democracy does depend on an informed electorate. And so it's very important that we work to inform ourselves as to the candidates and what the issues are and get the information. So I think that is very critical to strengthening our elected officials. With respect to judge races, as Judge Abdul Salam talked about, judge races are generally, there's not really a lot that the electorate learns about them because we are very much interested in the other two branches, the legislative and the executive, and sort of the judges are kind of under the radar. But I've made as many efforts as I can to sort of get out and try to educate people as to how the process works. Again, it can be overwhelming in terms of people taking in all the information, but I think we have to keep working at getting information and then getting involved. I think it's one thing to elect officials, but then in terms of the two branches, judges are a little different. I think it's important that people remain active and help support officials in carrying out some of the platforms that they've espoused. I think it's very important that people not just vote, but they do become active. The likes of our panelists, Viney Burrows and others, have been active in trying to galvanize support, organize people. So I think that's a very important part of assuring that we have elected officials that represent our interests.
I'd just like to also chime in with an answer with my co-moderator here, just in terms of some additional points. In terms of media, it's very difficult to, I think, to lay out a plan of controlling the corporate media, the elite media. So what do we look at, how do we view and assess our options in terms of alternative media, and what do we do there? We have witnessed in our communities across the country the death of black radio or the elimination of black radio. Those Black voices, those airwaves that allowed us to bring forth our story and to air our story to the public. Here in New York City, we have maybe 40 hours of music and 30 seconds of news. So I think when we look at this problem and we try to deal with this problem, we have to look at the support of alternative media and how do we support that. I won't go through all of the radio stations. We also have to look at the digital divide, because now we have so many great radio programs, stories, airways, Black radio that is now on the internet. And so how do we begin, as someone said, how do we begin to educate the public in terms of the availability of an alternative source for news for us? And how do we parlay that into a national entity or organization? So that, in fact, we are building blocks in terms of news. And finally, I want to talk about the lack of organization infrastructure that we have in our own communities, particularly in the progressive communities. What are our organizations? Where are they? What organization structure do we have that we can build on and address not only the needs of media, because we know we're not going to get a fair shake in some of the corporate media. So how are we building organizational infrastructure within our own communities? And what does that mean? And how do we bring those resources to build a sustainable organizational infrastructure? And these are the broader issues that we have to deal with. And we're always in crisis mode, and we're responding here and there. That is why, in my own personal opinion, and certainly not that of my organization, the Harlem Tenants Council, Cynthia's McKinney's campaign is so important because it is truly about building a movement. And we hear literally every 4 years, you go to the polls and you vote for a Democrat while you hold your nose. And we all know that. Hold your nose while you vote for here and there. And we literally saw the advances, if one could call that, almost dissipate and disappear in the last two elections, where the Black vote was stolen outright or not even counted at all. And I suggest to you that we are going to go into a third round of that. So how do we begin that basic organization, hard grassroots work of really building a movement, and not the illusion of a movement based on jingoism and false promises for change, when in fact those changes are to the almost in sync with the most reactionary candidate within the Republican Party. So this is a very important issue for me in terms of how do we build political, sustainable, physical, monetary infrastructure, and then out of that, truly we can have a campaign of character, of credibility, of accountability, and transparency. And these are the broader issues that I believe personally a Cynthia McKinney campaign will allow us to take the step down that road.
The next question will be directed to the Honorable Cynthia McKinney with a little bit of a prelude. I was in Atlanta during the Civil Rights Movement collecting data for my doctoral dissertation on Dr. King. And my finding at the time was that a lot of middle-class Atlantans wished that he would shut his mouth and go away.
Yes, yes.
I also think I draw a parallel with some of your experiences. They wish you would shut your mouth and go away and let them be comfortable with their spoils and not worry so much about what the masses of black people are experiencing. What are you finding, Cynthia, as you go around the country in terms of the support of middle-class black people?
I think it's clear that we have, I've been to 24 states as I've traveled around with the Power to the People campaign. And we have people from all walks of life, former Republicans who are now questioning, former Democrats who are questioning independents, who are questioning people who have never participated in the process, now questioning just exactly why they should be involved, how they can be involved in a way that will make substantive change, not just for their particular circumstances, but also for our larger community and our larger community as a country. Let me just say, with respect to the status of women in this country, I think it's important to remind folks that equal pay for equal work, well, that's still a dream. And it is a dream deferred in this country, where we have women who go to work every day, and they have similar skills, similar job titles, similar education, and yet they bring home less money than their male counterparts. That is not acceptable. Women are the overwhelming minimum wage workers in our country. And so if we have a public policy that reflects the values of the larger community in this country, then certainly equal pay for equal work ought to be something that is enforced. It is not. Certainly, instead of talking about increasing the minimum wage, we should be talking about instituting a livable wage. The Democratic Party is not doing that. Also, with respect to the image portrayed in the corporate media of black women, I was traveling through the, American rural heartland, going through Kentucky, and I chanced upon a store that looked like it came out of like the 1920s. And there on the shelves were various images of the Mammy dolls. I bought them all. My original intention was to buy them so no one else could buy them. And so then, but as I traveled around in, like Georgia's a Confederate South, and I found more and more and more of these lawn jockeys and the Mammy dolls, and it brought to my attention, or into my memory, a comment that was made by Carol Moseley Braun when she was running for re-election to the United States Senate, and the corporate press portrayed her. I mean, it was as if they were talking about me. And she said, the white